I worked night shifts at a supermarket for just under a year. Shelf stacking mostly, nothing special. You clock in, put on a high-vis vest that smells faintly of cardboard and cleaning fluid, spend the night pretending you aren't counting the minutes until morning. Night shift was quiet, but it wasn't empty. There were usually 5 or 6 of us on the floor, spread across different sections. And one supervisor in the back office. You saw the same people every shift. You had to. There wasn't enough staff not to. That's how I noticed him. I didn't see him arrive. I just realised at some point that he was already there. It was around midnight. I was halfway down the canned goods aisle, breaking boxes down, when I saw someone at the far end doing the same thing, same movements, same pace, high-vis vest, hood up, head down. That wasn't strange on its own. People got moved between aisles all the time. What stood out was that I didn't recognise him. Night shift teams were small. You learn faces quickly, even if you don't know names. This guy was tall, slim, maybe late 30s, gloves on, no trolley besides him, just carrying stock by hand. I assumed he was moved. I finished my section and pushed my empty trolley towards the back, passing him as I went. I nodded. "All right?" I said. He didn't look up, didn't respond. That still didn't bother me. Some people just didn't want to talk. Nights attracted that kind of person. First thing that made me pause happened about an hour later. By then I had moved to the cereal aisle. I looked up and saw him again a few shelves down, restocking the same brand I was holding, same product, same shelf height. I stopped. Normally supervisors split aisles deliberately so no one doubled up. It wasted time otherwise. "Sorry," I said, holding up the box. "Did they move you over here?" He shook his head slightly, still didn't speak. I moved on. I assumed wires had crossed somewhere above my pay grade. An hour after that, I saw him again. Different aisle, same behaviour. Always quiet, always alone, always restocking, but never breaking down boxes. No cage, no waste trolley, no cardboard left behind. That was when it started bothering me. Around 3 in the morning, I went to the staff corridor to grab a drink. So past the lockers, I noticed one standard open. It wasn't mine, it wasn't anyone else's I recognised. Inside was a folded high-vis vest, clean, too clean. No name written on the tag. I mentioned it to my supervisor later casually. "Hey," I said, "did we get a new guy tonight? Tall, quiet, hoodie?" He frowned at the rotor on screen. "No," he said, "same team as usual." I laughed a little, assuming he was joking. "No, seriously, he's been on grocery most of the night." My supervisor didn't laugh back. "There are 6 of you tonight," he said, "and I know where all 6 are." Something in his tone made my stomach tighten. We checked the CCTV. The cameras showed the aisles clearly, empty walkways, shelves, stock. What we didn't see was the stranger. Every now and then there was movement, a trolley wheel passing the end of an aisle, a shadow that didn't quite line up with the lighting, but no clear image of him, no face, no body. What we did see was stranger than that. Products moved on camera cuts, items appeared on shelves without footage of anyone placing them there. Sections went from half done to finished without showing how. My supervisor called security. Whilst we waited, I went back out to the floor with another staff member. We didn't split up. In the frozen aisle, we found half-stocked cage. Not assigned to anyone, not on the list. It was filled with a mix of items from different departments, stacked neatly like someone had been building it slowly over time. Behind the cage, on the floor, was a single glove, black, rubberized grip, my size. It wasn't mine. Security arrived just before opening time. They checked the aisles, the stockroom, staff areas, and the loading bay. They didn't find anyone. What they did find was worse. Someone had been inside the store after closing for weeks. Not stealing, not damaging anything, just working. Using staff entrances, accessing locked areas, avoiding cameras without disabling them, blending in. The police were called, statements were taken and locks were changed, procedures tightened. They said it was likely someone who had worked there before, someone who knew the layout well enough to move without being noticed, someone who understood the routines. I never saw him again, but sometimes when I go into a supermarket late at night and see someone restocking an aisle, I still hesitate, just for a second, and I still catch myself wondering whether they're supposed to be there. I used to go grocery shopping late all the time. Not because I loved it or anything, it was just easier. The store was quieter, you weren't dodging carts every 5 seconds, and you could actually find what you needed without someone stopping dead in the middle of an aisle like they'd been unplugged. This happened on a weeknight. I want to say Wednesday, but I'm not completely sure. I know it was a day where I'd worked later than usual, and I remember being hungry and annoyed and thinking I'd just grab a few things and go home. It was one of those bigger supermarkets that's open late, not 24 hours, but late enough that you'd assume you've got time. I pulled into the parking lot, and there were still cars there, which made me feel normal about it. A few scattered spots filled, nothing packed, but not empty. I went in through the main doors and grabbed a basket because I wasn't planning on doing a full cart. I remember the little clickety-clack of my shoes on the floor, and that smell grocery stores always have. Kind of cold and clean, but also like fruit and detergent and bakery bread all mixing together. At first it was just a normal late night store, a couple of people wandering around, not many. I noticed a guy near the front looking at the deli case. I saw an employee further down one aisle with one of those stocking carts. It felt like any other time I'd gone in late. I headed towards the back because the stuff I needed was mostly back there. Milk, eggs, a couple of frozen things. And I think I needed some paper towels too. I had a list on my phone, but I wasn't really following it. More like doing a loop and grabbing whatever I remembered. I noticed the music first, I think. Not because it stopped dramatically or anything. It's more like I became aware of it. The way you do when the volume changes. And the store had that usual background music. And then at some point it got quieter or cut out or something. It wasn't like a recording scratch. It just wasn't there anymore. And I remember thinking, did they turn it off because it's late? Like, maybe they did that close to closing time. I don't know. It wasn't a big deal in my head at that moment. A minute later, the intercom came on. It was one of those generic announcements you barely listen to, something like customer assistance needed in aisle 7. I didn't even process it. I just kept walking and turning down the aisle I needed. I went through the produce first, grabbed a couple of things I needed, then cut over towards the dairy. The store felt quieter than it had when I walked in, but that can happen late. People finish up and leave, employees go into the back, you stop hearing conversations, and all you're left with is the freezer hum and the sound of your own movements. I picked up the milk, eggs. I stood there for a second, deciding between brands like it mattered. Then I shut the fridge door and kept going. The intercom announcement happened again. Same kind of thing. Customer assistance needed in aisle 7. I actually looked up this time, without really knowing why. Like my brain went, okay, that's twice. But I didn't have a reason to think it was about me. I wasn't in aisle 7. I wasn't waiting for help, and it wasn't like they said my name. I remember thinking it was probably a cashier calling a manager or something, or maybe someone spilled something they needed to clean up. I didn't care. I was trying to get out of there. I walked towards the frozen section next. The frozen aisles in that store were along the back wall, and it's weird because those aisles always feel colder and a little darker, even when the lights are on. The glass doors reflect everything, and you see your own movement in the corners of your eyes. I grabbed 2 frozen items. Don't ask me what they were. Pizza, something easy. That's how I ate back then. Grab something you can throw in the oven and call it dinner. Then I started heading forward again, looping back towards household stuff. That's when I realised I hadn't seen anyone in a while. Not in a dramatic way. Not like, oh my god, I'm alone. It was more like I looked up expecting to see someone at the end of the aisle, and there wasn't. And I listened expecting to hear a cartwheel or someone talking. I didn't. It was just quiet. I turned down one of the aisles in the middle of the store, the ones with dry goods, cereal, pasta, canned food, that kind of thing. And as I walked, I had this small thought that the aisle felt longer than usual. That sounds stupid, but it's the best way I can explain it. Like I knew the store layout, been there a bunch, but standing in the middle of that aisle, it felt like shelves were going on a little further than they should. I stopped near the middle because I needed something, maybe rice or pasta, and I checked my phone list. I remember my screen was dim because it had auto-dimmed, and I had to tap to wake it up. That's when the intercom came on again. Customer assistance needed in aisle 5. This time I noticed it because I was in aisle 5. I looked up automatically, like the speakers were going to point at me. I stood there, holding my basket,
and kind of just waited, expecting an employee to show up or say something else. Nothing happened. No footsteps. No cleanup needed. Just that one line. After a couple of seconds, I started walking again. I grabbed whatever I was there for and headed towards the front. When I got closer to the registers, I saw something that made me slow down. The checkout lanes looked closed. Not all of them, maybe, but the ones I could see didn't have lights on. There weren't even any cashiers standing there. Like, the little register screens were dark. There wasn't even that normal late-night single lane open with a tired person scanning items. I stood there for a second, thinking maybe I was looking at the wrong area. So I moved a little to the side and looked again. Same thing. No open registers, and then I noticed something else. The front doors weren't opening. They were closed, shut, like locked metal gates or anything. It was still the glass doors, but when I walked towards them, they didn't slide open. I stepped closer, waved my hands like an idiot. Nothing. That's when I felt my stomach drop a little. Not full panic, more like, okay, what? I turned around and looked back into the store. Still didn't see anyone. The aisles behind me were lit, but they looked empty. The whole place had that weird after-hours vibe, where the building feels too big for the amount of people inside. The intercom crackled again. This time it wasn't the customer assistance line. It was the closing announcement. Something like, "Attention shoppers, the store is now closed. Please bring your final purchases to the front." Thing is, I remember thinking that can't be right, because I didn't think it was midnight yet. I hadn't been there that long. I hadn't been wandering around for hours. I pulled out my phone again, and the time said 11:58 p.m, so the announcement made sense. But the part that didn't make sense was the fact that nobody else seemed to be reacting. If the store was closing, where were the other shoppers? Where were the employees guiding people out? Where was the manager doing the things where they walk around and tell you you've got 5 minutes? Felt like the store had just decided it was done. I walked back towards the aisles because my first thought was that maybe the front area was being cleaned and the checkouts were temporarily shut down. I needed to go to customer services or self-checkout or something. I didn't know. I was trying to find a normal explanation. As I walked, the intercom came on again. "Customer, please remain where you are." It was the same voice as the other announcement, same bland tone, but the wording was different. And I remember stopping immediately because it didn't sound like a normal store announcement. And I looked around like maybe I was missing someone standing right next to me. Nobody. I kept walking anyway because what else do you do? Stand there and listen to a speaker? I headed towards the customer service desk area because I thought maybe someone would still be there. Nobody. The desk lights were off too. And then, this is the part I still don't like thinking about, I noticed the lights changing. Not like a horror movie where everything goes black. It was slower. Sections dimming, like they were shutting off certain aisles to save power or something. The far end of the store got darker first, and it made the middle aisles look like a tunnel. I started walking faster. I was done shopping. Didn't care about the groceries, I just wanted to get out. I went back towards the front doors and tried them again. Still nothing. I found the small sliding door by the entrance where they sometimes kept carts. I pushed on it, didn't budge. It had that locked, heavy feeling. I remember this stupid, normal thought. Am I actually locked in? I turned and looked behind me again. I could still see down into the store and it was quiet. The freezer hummed, the faint electrical buzz of lights. No people, no carts moving. The intercom crackled again. "Please do not leave your current position." I swear that's what it said. I'm not dressing it up. It's the exact kind of phrasing that made my brain go cold. I didn't answer. There was nobody to answer. But I did say out loud, "Hello?" Like that was going to help. Nothing. Then I heard something that sounded like movement in one of the aisles. Not a voice. Not footsteps clearly, just that sound of cardboard or packaging shifting, like someone sliding a box off the shelf. I turned my head towards it and just stood there. I could see into the aisle from where I was. The shelves blocked the view, but I could hear it faintly. Then it stopped. That's when my heart started going properly. Not fast because I was running, fast because my body had decided something wasn't right. I pulled my phone out and dialed 911. My hands were shaky, and I remember being annoyed at myself for that. Like, get it together. The operator answered and I tried to explain what was happening, but it came out messy. "I'm in a grocery store," I said. I think I'm locked inside. She asked me what store, what address. She asked me if I was alone. I said I thought I was. She asked me if I could see any employees. I said no. While I was talking to her, I kept looking around the front area. I didn't want to turn my back on the store, and I didn't want to walk deeper into it either. I was sort of stuck in that open space by the registers. The operator told me to stay on the line and stay in a well-lit area if possible. I remember almost laughing because the lights were literally going down in sections behind me. I told her that. I said the lights are shutting off. She paused for a second like she wasn't sure what to do with that information. Then she asked if I felt threatened. And I hesitated because at that point nothing had attacked me. Nothing had grabbed me, and there wasn't some guy running at me with a weapon. It was just a feeling that the building was wrong. I said, I don't know. I shouldn't be locked in here. The operator said officers were being dispatched to check the location. As soon as she said that, I heard footsteps. Actual footsteps. They weren't loud, and they weren't running. They sounded like someone walking at a normal pace in shoes with a hard sole, and they were coming from one of the aisles. I froze. I tried to look down the aisle, but I couldn't see far enough because of the shelf end caps. I could hear the steps though, and it sounded like whoever it was wasn't trying to be quiet. I said into the phone, someone's here. The operator asked where they were. I said, I don't know, I can hear them. The footsteps stopped, and then the intercom came on again. This time it was the regular closing message, like someone had flipped back to a normal script. Thank you for shopping with us. Please exit the store. And then, like it heard itself, the front doors opened. Just like that, the system had remembered what it was supposed to do. I didn't stand there and analyse it. I didn't try to be brave. I grabbed my basket and left it on the floor and walked out through the doors. As soon as I stepped outside, I felt like cold air hit my face and it snapped me back into reality a little. The parking lot was still there. The cars, streetlights, everything normal. I turned around and looked back through the glass. The store looked fine. Lights were on in the front area again. Not bright, but on. I could see down one aisle and it looked like any other grocery store. I stayed on the phone with the operator and I told her I was outside now. She told me to wait in my car and keep the doors locked until officers arrived. I sat in my car and stared at the store entrance. I kept expecting to see someone come out behind me, like a manager or an employee, or just anybody. Nobody came. 2 police cars showed up maybe 10 minutes later, lights on, but not full sirens. They parked near the entrance and 2 officers came over to my car. Rolled my window down just enough to talk. I probably looked ridiculous. I was sweaty and pale. I had nothing in my hands because I'd left the basket inside. They asked what happened. I tried to explain. I told them I went in shopping, and the store felt empty, the registers were closed, the doors stopped opening, announcements happened, and I called 911. They listened, but you could tell they were trying to translate it into something that actually made sense. One of them asked, did anyone threaten you? Did you see anyone? I said no. I didn't see anybody, clearly. They asked me if I'd been drinking. I hadn't. They asked me if I had a medical condition. I didn't. They went inside. I stayed in the car, watching through the glass, and I could see them walking around near the front. They spoke to each other, then one of them went further into the store and disappeared behind the aisles. After a few minutes, they came back out. One of the officers walked over and said, the store's clear. He said there was a night manager in the back office, said the store closed normally at midnight. Employees were doing their usual tasks, and there wasn't anything wrong with the doors. I asked him about the announcements. He said the night manager told him the intercom had been used for a closing message, and that was it. I asked him if they could check the cameras. He said they could, but it wasn't really a police matter unless there was a crime. He said if I wanted, I could talk to the store manager in the morning. Then he said the line that really got to me. He said, sometimes when a store is quiet like that late at night, it can mess with your head. You'd be surprised. I nodded like I agreed, but what was I supposed to do? Argue with a cop about how a supermarket felt wrong? They left. I sat there a minute longer looking at the entrance, watching people I hadn't noticed before, like employees moving behind the registers. The store still looked normal. Eventually I drove home, and nothing followed me. No car behind me, no mysterious call, no dramatic aftermath. But I didn't go back there at night again, because the part I can't get past is how normal it looked from the outside, even when I was standing inside, and it felt like the building had turned its attention onto me. I know how that sounds, I do. But I also know I wasn't sleepy, I wasn't drunk, I wasn't imagining the doors not opening, and I know what I heard over those speakers. That's why I don't shop late anymore, not because I think I'm going to get kidnapped in the cereal aisle, just because I don't want to feel that again. Like a place you've been 100 times, suddenly deciding you're the only thing in it. I used to stop at the same supermarket on my way home from work. Not every day, but often enough that I didn't really think about it anymore. It was on my route, the parking lot was easy to go in and out of, and I knew exactly where everything was. I could walk in, grab what I needed, and be back in my car 10 minutes later if I didn't get distracted. This happened late, but not ridiculously late. Around 9:30, maybe 10, the store was still open for another couple of hours. I remember checking the time in my car before going in because I'd thought about skipping it and just eating whatever was at home. I went in anyway. The store wasn't busy, but it wasn't empty either. A few people scattered around, carts moving slowly, an employee near the front restocking something by the seasonal aisle. Normal. I grabbed a basket and headed towards the produce first, like I always did. The first thing I noticed, and it's only obvious in hindsight, was that the store felt quieter than usual for that time of night. Not silent, just muted. Like sound didn't travel very far. I picked up a couple of things. Apples, something green. I don't remember exactly, I wasn't really paying attention. I was tired and on autopilot. As I turned out of the produce and onto the main aisle, I noticed a man standing near the end of it. He wasn't doing anything strange, and he was just standing there looking at the shelves. No cart, no basket, hands at his side. I didn't really think much of it. People do that sometimes, especially if they're deciding between things. I walked past him and turned down the next aisle. A few minutes later I noticed him again. Different aisle, same posture, still no basket. Still not really interacting with anything on the shelves. This caught my attention, but only in a mild way. I assumed maybe he was waiting for someone. Or maybe he was one of those people who just wander around before deciding what to buy. I kept shopping. I went through dairy, grabbed milk and yogurt. Then I headed towards dry goods. As I turned into the aisle, I noticed him again. Same man, same clothes, same position near the middle of the aisle. This time I slowed down. He wasn't looking at any product, he wasn't reading labels, he was just standing there facing the shelves, like he was pretending to shop. I stopped my trolley and stood there for a second, pretending to check my phone, just to see if he'd move. He didn't. After a few seconds he turned his head slightly, not enough to face me directly, but enough that I could tell he knew where I was. That's when I felt that uncomfortable tightening in my chest, the one you get when you realise someone's attention is on you. I moved on. I didn't confront him, I didn't stare, I just walked past and continued towards the back of the store. I told myself I was being paranoid. By the time I reached the frozen section, I'd convinced myself it was nothing. I grabbed a frozen meal and shut the door a little harder than I needed to. The sound echoed more than I'd expected. When I turned round, he was at the end of the aisle. Not close, but close enough that I hadn't heard him arrive. He didn't look at me. He just stood there, facing the freezers on the opposite side, like he'd been there the whole time. I remember thinking, okay, this is weird. I walked past him quickly and headed back towards the front. As I did, I started paying more attention to the store itself. That's when I realised something else. I hadn't seen any of the other customers I remembered from earlier in quite a while. The woman with the cart near the produce, the employee at the front, none of them seemed to be around anymore. I told myself they'd probably gone into the back or checked out and left. That happens, people come and go. Still, didn't like how empty it felt. I turned down another aisle and stopped abruptly. He was already there. This time he was standing at the far end, blocking the straight path through. Not intentionally, I don't think, just positioned in a way that meant I'd have to pass fairly close to him to get by. I stood there, pretending to examine something on the shelf, and waited. After a few seconds, he stepped aside and moved into the next aisle. I let out a breath I didn't realise I'd been holding and went past him. That should have been the end of it, really. But as I moved, I started noticing small things that made the situation feel wrong. Every aisle I went into after that, he was either already there or appeared shortly after I arrived. Not right next to me, but always at a distance. Always positioned where he could see me without it being obvious. He never spoke, never picked anything up, and he never went to the front of the store. I changed direction deliberately. I doubled back, paused longer than necessary. Every time after a short delay, he was there again. At that point, I stopped trying to rationalise it. I headed straight for the registers. When I reached the front, my stomach sank. The registers were open, but there was only one cashier, and she was helping someone else. The rest of the lanes were empty. I put my basket down and stood near the end of the checkout, keeping my eyes on the aisle behind me. He was standing near the entrance to one of them, watching. Not staring directly, just there. I considered asking the cashier for help, but I didn't know what I'd even say without sounding ridiculous. By the time it was my turn, he had moved closer. Still not near enough to touch me, just close enough that I could feel him behind me. The cashier scanned my items and asked if I wanted a receipt. I said yes, even though I usually didn't. As she handed it to me, I glanced over her shoulder towards the door. It was still open, people could come in and people could leave. I grabbed my bag and walked quickly towards the exit. As I stepped through the doors, I looked back. He had stopped just inside the store. He didn't follow me out. He just stood there inside, watching me leave. I walked fast to my car and locked the door immediately. My hands were shaking enough that I dropped my keys. I sat there for a minute, watching the entrance through my windshield. After a moment, he turned and walked deeper into the store again. Not towards the registers and not towards any other exits. Just back into the aisle. I sat in my car longer than I needed to. At first I told myself I was just calming down, but really I was watching the entrance, waiting to see if he had come out. He didn't. People went in, people came out, normal stuff. Eventually I started the engine and drove home. The drive wasn't long, but I noticed everything. Cars behind me, headlights staying too long in my mirrors. I told myself it meant nothing. One car followed me through 2 turns before turning off. I let out a breath I didn't realise I'd been holding once again. When I got home, I stayed in the car for a moment, keys in my hand, listening to the engine tick as it cooled. I went inside and locked the door, tested it, stood there a little longer than usual. Inside the house was quiet, too noticeable. I put my groceries away slowly, pausing more than once to listen. Nothing happened. I went to bed with the light on longer than usual, scrolling on my phone just to keep my mind busy. And the next day, everything felt normal again. But over the next few weeks I noticed small things I couldn't prove meant anything. Cars idling on my street, people standing too still in stores. That feeling of being watched that disappears when you look for it. I went back to that supermarket once, during the day. It was busy, loud, normal. I didn't see him. That should have been reassuring, and instead it bothered me more than I had expected. I didn't think he followed me. I didn't think anything actually happened. But every now and then when a car stays behind me for a few turns, I remember how deliberate it felt in that store, how it seemed like he was already where I was going to be. And I reminded myself that paranoia doesn't need proof. It just needs one night when nothing obvious went wrong.